When you ask the question, what is reality? What is life? It takes you outside. It immediately puts you on the other end, on the experienced side of things, leaving out the experiencer. It is always the most subjective, the most personal, that eventually will become the most objective. And consciousness turns out to be one such thing. It is the most intimate of subjectivities. And yet, it is the most objective thing that is out there. Consciousness is not being generated in the human body. So if it is not generated in the human body, then what I call me, my consciousness, my experience, is a universal existential phenomenon that we can understand objectively. We cannot experience it objectively, but we can understand it. Now, anything we can understand objectively becomes the domain of physics. Once we bring consciousness into the domain of physics, we have solved the problem of consciousness. Rather, we have expressed it in a language that it will become possible for physics to explain it and link it to the natural phenomena. That is the challenge. How do you explain gravity using consciousness? How do you explain observer effect using consciousness? How do you explain superposition using consciousness? How do you explain the fundamental forces of nature using consciousness? That is what physics wants. Because that is solving the problem for us. Because we already know what the problem is. We have different streams of knowledge that are not connecting. Quantum mechanics is not connecting with gravity. And we've been trying to solve this problem mathematically without realizing that it's not a mathematical problem. It is a philosophical problem. The problem philosophy sees, eventually science will see it, and when both come together, the right philosophical understanding and right language of describing that problem, will give ourselves an opportunity of solving the problem. And consciousness is one such thing. If you're able to get to the right philosophical understanding of consciousness and describe it using a purely objective language of physics, then you would be answering the ultimate question of life. What is life? And also, what is the purpose of life? We have an opportunity for the first time to objectively answer this question. Up until now, it was left to the individual. You discover your purpose. Don't ask us. You want to know what a black hole is? You want to know what a neutron star is? You want to know how galaxies are formed? Come to us. But if you're searching for meaning of life, purpose of life, you're on your own. This is where individuals have found it really hard to use science as the ultimate vehicle of exploration of life, because it does not answer this question. It leaves me out. It does not take long for an individual to understand that if I spend next 5 years studying physics, I will know something about something, but I'll know nothing about me. Now, that has to change, and consciousness changes that. Once consciousness is a part of physics, now you can objectively answer this question. What is the purpose of life? If you are an expression of consciousness, if you are a lower dimensional projection of consciousness, and it is consciousness through which you are perceiving this lower form, then there might be a way to withdraw from this attachment to this lower form and experience your consciousness as fullness, as completeness. Perhaps that is the purpose of life. Even this much is enough to support the philosophical need to know what life is. For individuals, this much is enough. If science is able to say this, you are a projection and consciousness is the fundamental nature of reality, you see what individuals will do with it. They'll figure it out. Because now science is acknowledging the most important thing, that there is something higher, there is something deeper, there is something purer, there is something clearer within us. For the individual to spend time with this, understand this more, explore it, the validity, the validation that has come from science will become the supporting structure. Individuals don't have to fight with their scientific mind. That has been the problem up until now. Science need not answer the question of what is the purpose of your life. But if it is able to describe the nature of reality for what it is, the nature of reality is so magnificent, so complete, that individuals will figure it out. If this is the nature of reality, then perhaps there is a way for me to experience it. If consciousness is who I am, what I am. Now think about it. If you look at the progression of dimensions, when you flatten space, literally you just flatten it, you get a plane. And you take a plane, you flatten it, you get a line. And you take a line, you flatten it, you get a point. Similarly, you take consciousness and you flatten it, you get space. So all lower dimensions are basically flattening. And what is this flattening process? It's a shadow. When the fourth dimension casts a shadow, we get our three-dimensional world. When three-dimensional world casts a shadow, we get a two-dimensional plane. When two-dimensional plane casts a shadow, we get a one-dimensional line. When a one-dimensional line casts a shadow, we get a zero-dimensional point. This much is enough for individuals to know, oh, my body is a shadow. My world is a shadow. But I am not a shadow. Because I am consciousness itself. So there is somewhere deep down within me, I am not flattened. I am not restricted. I am not just a projection. There is a place where I am truly without any limitation, without any restriction. This much is enough for individuals to connect this to meditation, connect this to spirituality, see the validity in Buddha's words, see the validity in Jesus' words, remove the misunderstanding that has surrounded their lives, remove all religious nonsense that has happened around beautiful lives of these individuals who discovered this for themselves. This language will give individuals the necessary tools to separate the wheat from the chaff. You can still go to the church, but you will not accept bullshit. You will know how to ask the right questions. When you figure out a direct way of understanding men like Jesus and Buddha, why do you need middlemen? You will only be finding individuals who have walked the path, individuals who have spent time on the inside. They will become your teachers, they will become your guides, not preachers, not people who simply use words without understanding the nature of reality. Automatically, things will begin to align. Truth will begin to emerge. We would no longer be able to hide it because scientifically we have discovered what consciousness is, and it is explaining everything. If it is explaining everything, how can you still believe in God? How can you still believe in some mysterious higher power? It's all consciousness. Things will get tremendously simplified. Yes, emotionally it feels like, if you are a religious person, it just feels like a big blow. You would have rather wished that we discovered that everything is being created by some God. Religious people would be thrilled if there is some scientific experiment that shows that Jesus is actually in heaven. We somehow figured out the place where he is. Forget about actually where he is. Even some sign that this phenomenon is real, that is what the religious mind is looking for. So for a religious mind, the idea that it is consciousness, and consciousness is not some mysterious entity, it is a higher dimension, that itself will be a big blow. Because now you have to put in the effort. The moment you understand the nature of consciousness, you will see consciousness will not remove your ignorance. It will not remove your suffering. You have to use consciousness to remove your pain and suffering. It's a completely different process. What we recognized as Jesus, Buddha, and all the awakened beings are representations of consciousness. Now, they cannot solve our problems because consciousness is totally oblivious to our existence. It is a totality that is simply aware of its own totality. Scientifically, we'll be able to understand all this. Oh, this is the relationship between the projection and consciousness. The projection is what is blocking consciousness. Hence, there is no way for consciousness to remove this perceptual distortion. The projection itself has to do it. We as individuals have to go on an inward journey to clear out this perceptual distortion. Now that becomes the purpose of life. We will not be able to accept any other purpose than this because this will be scientifically validated. The purpose of going to heaven, the purpose of being saved will not hold against a scientific fact that it is consciousness that is the ultimate nature of reality, and we know how to understand it. We know how it functions. There we would have solved the hard problem of consciousness. From a philosophical domain, we would have brought it to the domain of physics. And the moment something comes into the domain of physics, it will eventually become a part of our mainstream knowledge. It will become a part of our conversations, our daily language. You might still argue, well, science has discovered so many different things, disproving God, but still religions exist, still people are religious. But with one exception, science has not explained consciousness. Nobody can predict what's going to happen when science is able to objectively, clearly bring in consciousness into the laws of nature. It has never happened. So there is no reason to simply be stuck in the past and say, well, in exactly the same way, how there has been a divide between science and religion, this divide will continue. This divide has existed because science has not explained the ultimate of subjectivity's consciousness. The day it is able to do that, how can this separation still exist? I cannot see this separation existing. It is only a matter of time before religion completely drops off, because self-inquiry will become scientific. Answering the ultimate purpose of life will become a domain of science. And once science is able to answer these questions, why would you want to go to the church? Why would you want to go to the temple? People will continue to do it for emotional reasons, because that is what they've been holding on to. But slowly it'll just drop off, because there will be nothing to renew religion. When an individual becomes enlightened, a religion will not develop around it, because now that we have an objective scientific language, his life will be understood. Why he sat quiet? What is the meaning of resurrection? What is the meaning of a new birth? What is the meaning of kingdom of heaven? We can just compare his life to existing laws of consciousness and we'll know exactly what he's talking about. We long for that experience. We would want to connect with that experience, but we would not turn his life into a blind religious ideology, because we are no longer lost in the dark. Imagine if consciousness as a scientific principle existed 2000 years ago when Jesus was alive. There was no reason to crucify him. Imagine if the Roman authorities knew, oh, there is this thing called consciousness. And when they asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And if he said, no, my kingdom is not of this world, they would have said, oh, are you talking about the fourth dimension? He would have said yes, and they would have said, okay, go. That's it. It's that simple. Because we didn't know what this other world was, we crucified him. Consciousness is that other world. It just seems like another world because it is higher, transcendental. But it is also a part of our subjective experience. That is how we solve the problem. Starting philosophically, experientially understanding it, and then explaining it using the language of science.